Now, what is the real estate market going to be doing over the next several months here in 2025? The answer is, I don't really know, but I have a guess. This podcast is likely coming out right around fall time. And so I'm going to be projecting what I think the fall and the winter is going to be. So it's going to be more than just 2025. We're also going to leak into 26. And all I can tell you is my analysis. Now, the way I do my market analysis for this exact topic is I do look at some data, but I look at more what's actually going on in the real estate market because I'm in the trenches. Like, we're actually talking to realtors. We're actually talking to wholesalers. We're actually trying to put properties under contract. We get it, okay? And so I want to take one little step back before I answer the question about what I think 2025 and early part of 26 is going to look like. And I may produce this episode and look like a complete fool. I have been fooled in the past. And in fact, I was fooled in 2020. All the indicators that I saw in 2018 and 2019 seemed to think, hey, we're going in a downward trajectory. And then what happened? COVID hit. And then what happened? We printed a bunch of money. And then what happened? The real estate market went nuts. Now, I'm glad that I was holding a bunch of real estate. Like, I had sold in Colorado in 18 and 19, took that money and went and I'm glad I didn't stick it under my mattress. I know some guys who did, who literally said, man, it's going nuts right now. 18, 19, the market is going crazy. Let me pull my money out of the stock market or whatever it is, stick it under my mattress and wait for an amazing opportunity. Glad I didn't do that. Instead, what I did was I took that money and put it into other markets, San Antonio, Texas, Memphis, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri. I also bought a software company. I paid off some debt. I did a bunch of stuff with my exit here in Denver. But I'm glad I got back into real estate because what happened in 2020? We had COVID. The solution to the problem, our government thought that the solution to COVID was to just print a whole bunch of money and hand it out to everybody. Because what they had done was created fear in the marketplace. They're shutting people down. They're quarantining everybody, and businesses are shut down. They're telling people to stay in their house, and people are like, we can't live. The electric bill is still due. The car note is still due. My light bill is still due. The bank is telling me I still got to make my mortgage payment, but you're not letting me go to work to earn the income to pay that. And I think it kind of shocked the government a little bit to recognize how many Americans are living literally paycheck to paycheck. Like, the idea of, hey, stay in your house for a week was like a financial crisis to many people. Like, hey, just don't work for a week. Many could not survive that. And then they said 2 weeks, 14 days to cover this, reduce the spread or whatever, to stop the spread. People were freaking out at 7 days. Now you tell them it's going to be 2 weeks. How are they going to survive? And of course, we know that 2 weeks turned into other things. And then they printed money and they came out with, giving everybody $600 or whatever it is. And the PPP loan came out so that business owners could go get loans to pay employees and keep the economy going. And the net of it all is they printed $7 trillion. And what did some people do with that? Some people kept their business going and paid their employees. Some people took that money and bought real estate. They bought boats, they bought RVs, they bought fifth wheels, they did a bunch of stuff, but they couldn't vacation because everything is shut down. So instead they said, let's go buy real estate. And so my business in 2020 actually did pretty well because we're on the front edge of this whole thing. And, we buy and sell and my holdings went up from 2020 even up until this year, 2025. So my real estate holdings went up. The deal volume went up. Like, we were selling, the hedge funds were buying everything. So we were wholesaling deals to the hedge funds, the deals that we just didn't want or didn't think we could make good money on. The hedge funds bought all that stuff. Well, now what's happened? Some of the hedge funds have literally gone out of business. I predicted that. You can go back and see, I said, they're paying way too much. We thought that they were paying way too much in 2015 and 16 when they started entering in the foreclosure markets here in Colorado. And that's when the foreclosure markets pretty much dried up. So in Colorado, the hedge funds came in, started overbidding everything, and us mom and pop real estate shops were just struggling. And so it didn't make a ton of sense to continue to do real estate deals from the foreclosure auction. So we came with alternative methods. And that's where a lot of guys started getting into, marketing and direct mail. And so the software business that I got into is helping those active investors try to find deals using, marketing channels. Well, I thought that in 2019 we'd see a crash, that I was super smart on buying at the top and exiting a big market. And then what happened? We printed a bunch of money. They started buying more real estate. What happens when you start buying real estate? The prices go up, and I looked foolish here in Denver. So what I'm attempting to predict might make me look a little foolish. But again, I want to take another step back and talk to you about the cyclical nature of real estate in general. So the prime time historically to sell houses is in the springtime. So think, April, May, June, March, April, May, June, that kind of thing. Why? Why is that a great time? Well, you're about to wrap up school. This is what families think of, particularly single-family houses. You're about to wrap up the school. You're thinking about if you're going to another place, the next school that little Johnny is going to get into. So it'd be really nice to kind of buy a house, close on it, move in, in the summertime, still go on your vacations, but make sure that you're all settled before the next school year starts. So people start looking in the spring. Also, nobody wants to move in the winter, particularly if you're in like a northern state. Like moving in Colorado in January, you're freezing your butt off. It could be a snowstorm. You got, do you really want to move? No, let's just kind of settle down until the weather turns. But a couple of those things, like historically, in any market, go to any sold data, you will see that houses sell for higher in the springtime than they do in the wintertime. That's pretty common. In fact, it kind of has a up and down, roller coaster type feel. That chart looks like that. Generally going in an upward direction over time, but from a seasonal perspective, springtime is a good time to list your house so you can kind of sell it in the late spring, middle of summertime. So there's a buying season of about, let's call it about, 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. A selling season, I should say, from like March to September. Then once you start getting into October, it gets more difficult to sell a house. This is coming from a fix and flip perspective. In October, it is more difficult to sell a house than it is in April. It's just the facts. Why? Kids are already in school. People going into the school district that they want, and therefore living in the neighborhood that it's zoned for that school district, is really important. They're not going to then up and move just because they like a different house. They're going to sit put for a little while. Well, in October, pretty much the market is now not as flooded. The only people who are looking to buy in October, November, December are people who are like having to move in during that time. Maybe they got a job transfer and the job said, hey, we want you out there starting October, November. So they're having to move. It also could be potentially single people who don't have kids, who the school system doesn't really care. So you do have a little bit of a market still in October and November before the weather starts to turn. But once it gets cold and frigid, particularly in markets like Denver and other northern, colder markets, but even Tennessee doesn't get a ton of snow. When it does, they get a half an inch of snow, they shut the whole town down. Even in Tennessee and Memphis, they don't want to move in December and January. So it is harder to lease up houses in the wintertime, and it's harder to sell them in the wintertime. That's just a fact. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss the next episode. Every week, we drop practical money strategies and real stories that'll change the way you think about wealth.